We should have Sean here in just a moment. Sean, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
All right. Well, great to have you on with us, and I am ready to be convinced. You are going to tell me that Senator Al Franken is vulnerable in the state of Minnesota in 2014. Believe me, there's probably nobody in the state who wants to hear this more than I do, but I'm still a skeptic, Sean. You have to convince me that this is for real.
Well, you should be skeptical. But the fact is, because he has done a good job of keeping his head low. I mean, I remember you and I think, talked about this back when he first got elected. We were thinking that he was going to implode because of who he is.
Right.
But he has done a good job of keeping a low profile, not doing anything super crazy. The fact is that he got elected with 42% of the vote. There's a three-way race, won by a couple hundred votes after many months of a recount and litigation.
Yep.
And that was a wave year for the Democrats. Remember, that was Obama's first election of president.
Indeed, you're right. Yes.
And so here we are, 6 years later. We have a landscape that looks a lot more like 2010 than it did in 2008 or 2012 as we're going into this November. And the fact is he's not really taken any hits. I mean, there's been a lot of organizations and folks running ads against other vulnerable Senate Democrats. And, American Encore decided to step into the breach because Al Franken is so wrong when it comes to attacking the First Amendment through the IRS that we felt like we needed to say something about it. And we did this poll, and it shows that, he's at 44%. Those are numbers that if political operatives saw those in 2010, they'd say that guy's a guy that's high on the target list.
Well, sure, so because the rule of thumb here, Sean, is, and by the way, Sean's from American Encore, DC, London. I mean, Sean's all over here. Right? I should have given you the full introduction, Sean. But my skepticism just leapt out in front of me. Yeah, I know it just got ahead of my manners. That's what happened. But when you're looking at an incumbent in re-election terms, anything below 50% usually does indicate vulnerability. There's Sean. Sean's now.
Sorry, I'm new to Skype.
Oh no, that's great. Skype. You're good now.
But it looks like my shirt is kind of glowing.
It's the stripes. The stripes will do that. That's actually kind of cool, though. It kind of gives it a nice, vibrant feel on the screen. But the being that far under 50% is, 44% usually does indicate some vulnerability, significant vulnerability. It's not, however, a death sentence. Barbara Boxer, for instance, was at 45% for most of her run up. And I think she was a 2012, or she may have been a 2010.
She was 2010.
She was 2010. Yeah, well, the wave didn't get all the way out to California, unfortunately. And for lots of reasons, the GOP out there is a little disorganized too. That's part of the issue. But she was vulnerable, but still ended up winning fairly easily over a good candidate. Carly Fiorina was a good candidate for California. And so, yeah, I agree that a 44% rating does indicate that there's at least some chance that you can knock Franken off. And Franken isn't Barbara Boxer. He's only been in for one term. But what poll was it that found that the 44%? That was a poll that was conducted by Magellan, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Magellan's a good polling outfit, but they usually do Republican polling. And so, and they do. They're a good pollster. I put them up there with PPP, for instance. PPP is a Democratic Party pollster, but they do good work. And as long as you know the direction that they're coming from, you can kind of get an idea. You take a look at the questions that they ask. Magellan's actually a lot more honest than PPP is in terms of what questions they include in these polls. I remember, wasn't it in 2012 and early in the cycle that they included a poll on interracial marriage? Of all things, and it's like, what the hell was that question here for? An issue that hasn't come up in 40-something years, but you're polling on it. Okay,
just
thank
about
you.
To again, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but Magellan's a pretty decent polling outfit. So I would say that number's probably at least in the range of reality. But here's where I'm skeptical. First off, I don't know that we're going to not be in a three-way race. A three-way race of 44% rating is probably pretty good. If it's just a two-way race, it's a little bit more of a challenge for Franken, but it also depends on how the GOP is doing in this state. And I mean, it's my state, and I hope the GOP does well. But let's face it, they're not terribly well organized, and you've got a pretty wide open primary over there. It looks like it's going to come down to Julianne Ortman and oh gosh, I never get the guy's name right. Is it Michael McDonald?
McFadden.
Michael McFadden. Michael McDonald sang for the Doobie Brothers. What the hell am I thinking? What a fool believes. I should have had that. I should have had that for the bumper music. What a fool believes. Yeah, Michael McFadden, who's a self-funder, who would be able to bypass some of that party disorganization with his own money. Julianne Ortman, though, got the Sarah Palin endorsement. I believe it was last week. Mm-hmm. And I think those are really the only two. Those are the two front runners, I think, for the Republican endorsement in the state of Minnesota. So what is the polling showing about Ortman and McFadden in terms of going head to head against Franken, or are we seeing any polling on that yet at all?
Yeah, well, we included that question in this poll. It has Franken at 44, Ortman at 41, and then Franken at 44, McFadden at 38. So both, he's at 44 either way, and they're both within striking distance. But this is, keep in mind, and as you point out, this is one poll. There hasn't been a lot of polling in this state. I think that we're going to have to wait and see how things develop. The one thing I do believe about Minnesota, and I know it's your home state, I've just got to believe that as Republicans and conservatives, we have to start making more inroads in places like that to make up for places that we're going to continue to lose, like Nevada. And Minnesota, to me, it strikes me as, the kind of state like Wisconsin that could start to turn more purple and red. But you'd have a better sense than I would on that.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been blogging for over 10 years. I'm coming up on 11 years, and in the fall will be 11 years I've been blogging out here. And I can tell you, every year from 2003 to 2012, we Minnesota bloggers have been saying, this is the year that Minnesota finally turns red. 2004, we thought for sure George Bush was going to win the state. First time, don't forget, Minnesota is the only state in the union to have never voted for Ronald Reagan. They haven't voted for a Republican president since Nixon's 1972 landslide. They didn't even go in. We were the one holdout state in Reagan's 49 state landslide in 1984 because Mondale was Walter Mondale was the Democratic nominee, and he's the local boy, and so the state turned out dutifully for him. But yeah, we've been saying that for pretty much 10 of my 10 blogging years. This is the year that the Minnesota turns red, or at least purple. But we haven't won a statewide race. The Republicans haven't won a statewide race since 2006, and the only Republican to win in 2006 was Tim Pawlenty, and we were actually kind of hoping that Pawlenty would be, keeping his powder dry for a run for the Senate seat against Franken. You got to get a better ringtone than that, man.
Yeah. It's embarrassing.
I've got "Call Me" by Blondie on mine, so it's never subtle. When it goes off, it's like everybody within 25 feet knows that my phone's going off.
Right.
But we're pretty informal here, Sean. So it's.
But I appreciate that.
But I mean, the issue here is not that the people wouldn't necessarily be enthused by the Republican agenda, maybe one that wasn't quite as, certainly not the Texas Republican message, I think, but a populist Republican message would probably resonate well here if you had a party that was organized to be able to deliver it. And frankly, since 2004, 2002, you just haven't had a party that's been that competitive up here.
Well, and that's the challenge. I mean, the question will be, because you've had some congressional seats that were surprises. Jim Oberstar losing in 2010.
Yes.
Surprise. And so maybe, this is the kind of environment where, the lightning can strike. I think what's important, though, and really what's come back to is that whether Al Franken is vulnerable or not, he needs to be held accountable for the trampling of the Constitution that he's engaged in. And, will he win or lose? That's less important to making sure that we're holding him accountable and saying, look, you of all people coming out of the entertainment industry should know better than to assault the First Amendment this way, because it's not just for some people. It's not just for entertainers of liberal bent. It's not just for senators. It's for everybody in America.
Well, yeah, and again, I think free speech is something that is actually a fairly strong value up here in Minnesota, and that's an argument that can be made. And I actually think Franken would be vulnerable if you don't have Barack Obama at the top of a ticket in Minnesota. I think you have an opportunity at least to win, and especially with the issues that are going on right now with Obamacare. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Strib. Was it on Sunday or Sunday evening or Sunday morning? But they had this huge expose on how there was all sorts of problems in the state Obamacare exchange, which is called MNsure. And the governor, I know, min uncertainty, I think would have been a better way of putting it. MNsure. And how Governor Dayton knew about it, how outside auditors had been sending up red flags, and how the MNsure management was not communicating that to the board. I mean, the whole thing is a disaster, and that's Dayton's responsibility. So Republicans have an opportunity, if they can organize well enough, to go after him. He's up for re-election this year.
Right.
And so, and Dayton's never been a great candidate. I mean, he's okay, but he's never been a great candidate. But once again, I mean, I don't know who they're going to get to run against him, who's going to be able to get past what my old radio partner, Mitch Berg, called the Alita Messenger Squad, which is his ex-wife, who is one of his biggest backers in politics. I guess it says something about you if your ex-wife is still supporting you in politics.
Yeah, that's an impressive feat.
Right? It actually is. You know, you have to respect that just a little bit, Sean, don't you?
I do.
Okay, there you go. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think you can build on principles. You build on first principles. You have to have the candidate and the organization there. But all right. So what else do you think? What else do you think would be a vulnerability for Franken in the upcoming election? Because you're starting to make me hopeful, and I hate you for it. By the way, I just hate you for it because this is like Lucy and the football up here for Republicans every year.
Pull the football back. Look, I think Obamacare is by far one of the best issues that can be used. And it's something that no one's really hammered Franken about at this point. And so I think there's a lot of movement that's possible in the numbers in that regard. Franken has been an unabashed champion of this thing. And,
yep.
And in the case of every single Democrat senator who is up for re-election, you can truthfully say that they were the deciding vote to pass this bill.
It's true.
It was 60. Right?
Right.
Every one of them. So all of them were the deciding vote. And I think the message like that probably would resonate very well. And connecting it to what does Obamacare mean to the individual Minnesotan?
Yeah.
How is it affecting their life? Personalizing the story and helping people understand that this has just been a disaster. It's going to not only destroy healthcare, but it's going to potentially destroy the nation because of how many the taxes, the regulations, the business burdens. I mean, this is, and the fact that the administration continues to break the law, in my opinion, by delaying certain implementation points. I mean, they're afraid to death of this thing.
The other thing that you can point to as well for Frank, and this is especially true for Minnesota, is those taxes on medical devices, yeah. Right? Because medical devices are a big industry here in the Twin Cities. And Franken and Amy Klobuchar were trying to get those taxes overturned. Republicans were trying to force them to find where they were going to replace the funds for it. Yep. And Democrats just couldn't pull the trigger on it, and the House wouldn't have taken it up anyway. But that is going to be a big deal up here, and they know that. The Democrats know that. On the other hand, Amy Klobuchar clobbered, can't even think of the guy who Kurt, it's a good guy. I can't think of his last name now.
I don't remember either.
The Republican.
It was a tough year.
It was a tough year. Yeah, 2012 was a really bad year, but she beat him like something like 29 points. I mean, it wasn't even, and I knew that was going to happen. I mean, yeah. Klobuchar is everything Minnesotans like. Nice, pleasant, competent, and boring, and that's Amy Klobuchar.
Well, and that bore out in the poll as well. When you look at Franken's approval was 44%. Klobuchar's approval was 57%. So you can see there's a wide gap
Right.
in,
Yeah.
in how people view her versus Franken. And not surprising for me right now, but Obama had a 53% disapprove on his job performance. So that goes to the Obamacare issue. It goes to the things that would be useful issues to be using against someone like Al Franken right now.
Right. All right. I want to talk to you a little bit. We got about 5 minutes left. I want to talk to you a little bit about exceptionalism, American exceptionalism. I know that you've been writing about that and you talk about American exceptionalism. I think a lot of people just don't I think they hear the term and they think, yay, America, but they don't necessarily, I mean, so there's like this connection, there's an emotional connection to it, but I don't know that people really grasp what American exceptionalism actually is. So what is your explanation of what American exceptionalism actually is?
Well, I think that the best way that I could describe the way I view American exceptionalism is borne out in the final speech that Reagan gave in the Oval Office in 1989, when he talked about, the shining city on a hill, that he talked about all his political life, what it meant, what freedom means, the importance of institutionalizing this sense of understanding that freedom is what makes us different than any other nation on earth. And he gave a warning. I mean, one of the things that he said, I'm sorry, looking at this. Well, now I can't find where I wrote my own quote. Oh, Reagan. So he said, our spirit is back, but we haven't reinstitutionalized it. We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise. And freedom is special and it's rare. It's fragile. It needs protection. And so I think ultimately my view of American exceptionalism is the defense of freedom. And where some people view American exceptionalism as some kind of like weird foreign policy discussion, or how we're trying to push American idealism across the world, that can be parts of it. But I think ultimately the core of it is, how do we protect freedom? That's ultimately maximize freedom, as Barry Goldwater talked about in The Conscience of the Conservative. How do we take the freedoms that we've been given, and recognizing that we've been given these freedoms by God, and they're to be protected by the government. These are not gifts from the government. And I think that's what sets us apart from the rest of the world. And we need to help people understand. I mean, what has alarmed me, and part of why I've been kind of on this, how do we help people see America as great, and why is America great and different, is that I was speaking on behalf of my former boss, Congressman John Shadegg, at a high school. This was in 2000. This is 11 years after Reagan's speech from the Oval Office. I started my speech by saying, raise your hand if you think that the United States is the greatest nation on earth. And less than half the hands went up. These are high school seniors. And that scared me. I just thought, how in the world is it that these kids don't understand that this is the greatest nation on earth? And then the second question was, what country would they pick?
They wouldn't, but see, that's the point. Here's what I think why I think people are so resistant to this idea, Sean, is that they wouldn't pick a country, because we're all equal. What's the line from The Incredibles? We're all special, which means that nobody's special. Nobody's special. And I love The Incredibles, by the way. It's my favorite Pixar movie of all time.
It's talk about a movie that's got a great, message to conservatism, right?
Right. Exactly.
Fantastic. But it goes to the point that we've got to spend time educating, particularly the young people in America, that there is something different about the United States. There's something different about the form of government we have. There's something different about the freedoms we've been given. We can't blame this on whoever the president is. I mean, one of the things that I've dealt with are people saying, "Oh, Obama has destroyed America's, American exceptionalism, or the whole concept of American exceptionalism." My point is, well, actually, I think that's been on the decline for so long that he's actually a consequence of this losing of American exceptionalism, right? I mean,
right. No, I think you're right about that.
The white electorate I could see electing him because of the hope and the change and the vision that he was proclaiming. There's no explanation to a re-election. of this person without understanding that we've lost a lot of that sense of American pride. And it's a vicious cycle. I mean, he is clearly making it worse. If you make someone dependent upon government, you don't think government is great. The nanny state is not viewed as this great ideal. And so becomes this vicious cycle that we have more people dependent upon the government, the less likely they're going to feel like this is a great nation.
Sean, we're going to have to let you have the last word on that. That's a great way to sum it up. Sean Noble, you can find him at American Encore. We got the links, by the way. He's also at DC London, which we don't have the links for. You're on the DC end of DC London, I'm imagining.
Well, I split time between. Well, we don't have a London office, but DC Phoenix just didn't sound very.
There you go. London sounds much better.
That's right.
I was teasing Lisa about that too. So
aspirational.
All right, Sean. Well, thank you so much for being on with us. Great talking to you. You made me hope once again. I'm going to get even with you at some point, Sean. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to get even with you at some point for making me hope again about the Senate race.
Done deal. Good.
Sean, thanks again.
Thank you, Ed. We'll see you.
All right, folks.